Hi, my name's Georgia Debney. I am a full-stack digital marketer, but I actually have a specialism in content creation because I have been making videos for about 12 years. I was that cringe YouTube girl before the word influencer ever existed, so I was posting vlogs when I was still in high school, and it was something I was tortured for, but that means I've described myself now as enough of a trailblazer that I've been bullied my whole career. As a result, I know how to make some videos, and I edit videos for other people sometimes because it's a service I offer through my website. If you're interested in that, then see the link in the description below. And today I'm going to walk through some edits I just made recently. These examples are from clients who would normally edit it themselves, but they felt that they wanted to get a professional to sort of level up what they were capable of producing and also wanted to save some time so they could focus on the actual elements of their business that they're doing. So the first one is from Danny Beaton, also known as Beaton Hair. He's in fact my hairdresser as well, so I had this done a few days ago and it's very humid and frizzy today, but otherwise I think it looks really great. And he does a lot of before and after reels. I've been in a couple of them myself. I think they're really cool. But when I was last at my hair appointment, we were talking about how he feels like he just can't produce what he sees in his mind's eye. So a little add-on I offer with my editing services is being able to give feedback on how to actually record better in the future. So that is something that I gave alongside the edit for the video. Now, the biggest issue I came across when I was editing his footage is naturally everything's shot on a phone, so there's a limited capability there. People think that phones can keep up with cameras because we're in the more modern era. It's just not factually true. It can't process nearly as much data. A phone camera is basically a sensor, and you know when you see those little clips where they go shot on iPhone. The iPhone was almost certainly at the back of a very complex rig that was just separate to the device. So one thing that I always do with client footage is I color grade it, because when you're shooting with everything on auto on your phone, you tend to end up with a very flat gray, sort of desaturated kind of look because it's trying to compensate and focusing on getting the shapes as opposed to getting the true to life colors. Like even now I have to shoot in HDR, which is the special mode on my camera, to get the most realistic colors on my proper professional camera. So that is something that you have to account for. Luckily, Danny has a phone that can produce relatively good quality videos for a phone in that it can absorb a lot of data. It's just when it compiles it together, it just sort of offers the blandest auto solution. So I went in and I made the colors more rich and put it truer to life. And luckily, because I've actually been in the location, I could know what exactly true to life looked like. And even though I hadn't seen the client's hair outside of this video, I knew what the environment would look like by comparison. So that was really good. Luckily, they're in a hair studio where there's actually a lot of external lighting. Like you've got the traditional beauty lights, but then there's ring lights everywhere. I have a little vendetta against beauticians thinking ring lights are the only lights in the world, but you know, and external lights, it makes cold and warm tones of white, so that was really good to work with. But unfortunately, it meant it was hard for me to deduce a true white, so I had to sort of use my experience to guess that one. Obviously, the biggest issue with phones is you end up with everything being really handheld and a little bit shaky, and then obviously you've got inconsistent speeds when someone's filming and they don't really know about the ninja walk that videographers use to get a smooth motion, and occasionally you just get a random jitter, especially when they're doing moving shots. Like it's a really common transition on social media for this sort of content is to do the zoom into black, zoom out to black from their hair. And when you're doing external stabilization, which is something I was doing artificially, then you sort of end up with a bit of a jut that you can't really account for. So this caused a few issues when I had to do artificial stabilization, which is naturally how it works, is it crops the image. So you get a little bit of blur because you have to stretch the pixels to fill the frame anyway. So when you're shooting at, I think it was a 1080p resolution as opposed to 4K, then that makes scaling it up a little harder. So you end up with a little bit of blur, but it is very accommodating on social media with that sort of thing when it's so negligible. But because it had to stretch it and then try to fix the movement, you ended up having motion blur be really visible. So part of the advice I gave for Danny in the end was to shoot slower and to have your shutter speed be at least twice your frame rate, which a lot of phones do allow you to edit that sort of thing, but then you're getting into the exposure triangle and some people just don't feel comfortable doing that. So basically shoot slower. I ended up speeding up the clips anyway, so it wouldn't have really mattered for the end result. I did experiment with a bit of speed ramping, but I just didn't think it brought out the best thing for Danny. Danny actually provided the clips in slow motion and full speed, so that wasn't something I had to do myself, but it is something I'm capable of doing. What a lot of people don't know is that to get a slow motion shot, you have to shoot it in a higher frame rate than you would have your end project be. So for example, if you wanted a slow motion shot and your timeline was 30 frames per second, all the normal speed shots were in 30 frames per second, so that's when I made my timeline. But then to have it be slow motion, you need to have at least double and then more to have anything noticeable. I don't know what the exact frame rate of Danny's clip was because I received it in the slow-mo format, but I would guess that it was somewhere between 60 to about 200 frames per second, and then it was slowed down. So I chose one before clip fast, one after clip fast, kept the in-out transition, and then just put a little cross dissolve to make it smoother so you didn't see like the fibers of the hair really close up in the shadow. And then I did the slow-mo shot with the color grading. I did a little bit of artificial sharpening to account for the motion blur and the cropping blur and all that sort of stuff, but then I also applied a noise reducer to sort of smooth out the grain that it created in the background. The second example I have is from a martial artist I know. I met him at a competition a while ago, long time ago, like a couple of years ago. I've not seen him in person since, but he's a really cool guy and he gets advice from me about digital marketing stuff sometimes. He's also a bit of a geek for that sort of stuff too, so we have good chats about it, but he's really not good at video, and he often complains that because he's teaching, he can't focus on actually getting clips himself. He can't make time to record content because he's focusing on the class, and the best he gets is things that he either gets one of his kids to shoot for him, or he gets like the parents of the students he's teaching to shoot for him. So the biggest issue here is the clips we were working with weren't actually shot with anything specific in mind. It was just random compilations of bits that people felt like recording. I received a lot of stuff that I didn't end up using. Again, shakiness, big issue. Like, people just really need to learn to tuck their arms in and move with their whole body if they're going to shoot on a phone, for example. And then also there was the inconsistent lighting issues because they were shooting in different sports halls for different days with different weather conditions and different artificial light sources, which are normally just overhead. And I have been in so many leisure centers and I can tell you that they're almost never lit well. Sometimes it's too dark for just the human eye, but it is dark for the camera like 10 times. And when it's so dark, you can really struggle to bring color out of the shadows. It seems that the files that were shot on these phones were a little lower quality as well, so there are sometimes times where I couldn't really bring out the true color of what was going on in the human perspective, but I managed to at least create a greater contrast so we can understand it better and see what's going on. A big issue with the parents getting clips is that these people are often on the sidelines and not up near the action because the people in the class are focusing on, doing taekwondo. So then I end up having to really stretch the pixels to actually see what's going on in the action. If someone's looking at a big random open sports hall with a lot of people and a lot of empty space, then they're going to be like, what am I looking at? So you really need to create the composition of the frame by stretching the shot, which unfortunately means it gets a lower resolution and again is more visible blur. So I had to do a bit more artificial sharpening with that, and it was again hoping for forgiveness of the audience because sometimes you just can't compensate for the clip, but you can improve on it. This was an issue that was quadrupled by the fact that some shots were recorded in landscape and some shots were recorded in portraits, and because this specific service is focused on making stuff for vertical videos, so reels, shorts, TikTok, stuff like that, which can then later be repurposed into stories, for example, then I made sure that I had to use it in vertical, but only one clip was actually provided to me in vertical orientation. And because this was one of the ones that was shot by a kid, I assume, it was actually putting at the floor for quite a lot of it. And I also didn't have a story to work with. At least with the hairdressing, I knew that there was a story of before and after this is a haircut, but every single video has to have what is known as an equilibrium, a disequilibrium, and a return to equilibrium, and a coherent story arc. You can't just put some clips together and go, this is cool, this is what we do. So I ended up picking and choosing a really simple one. The hook was, oh yeah, look, kids having fun, and because they were wearing doboks, which are the training suits, then it was obviously what they were taking part in vaguely. Then there was a little training clip of some drills that were going on with a child there, so it's like, look, kid having fun, kid learning skill. And then at the end it was a clip of a kid waving around his belt, and it's like, yay, achievement. And that is basically what I did there. So if you feel like you need some help with this or need some more specific advice, then get in touch with me at dibdabdigital.com/shop and look in my online services category, and you can benefit from some specialist advice too.